Aloha and good day. This is Clint Hansen with Maui Real Estate Radio, broadcasting 7 a.m. on Monday on the 11:10 a.m., 98.7 FM, 96 FM, and our friends on the west side at 95.5 FM. I also have co-host with me, Byron Yap of Axia Home Loans. Say hi, Byron.
Hello.
I
Good
also
Wednesday.
have, yeah. Well, it's always a Monday broadcast on the KAOI radio group. So,
Yep.
and then we also have Jen Russo of Maui Vacation Rental Association. She's the director there. Hey, Jen, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I am executive director at Maui Vacation Rental Association. We have a membership of owners and operators and managers of vacation rentals in Maui, and we're an advocacy and informative group.
The front line for vacation rentals. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the hard work you guys do over there. And again, Jason Economou, I really appreciate you coming on the show. He's the Government Affairs Director for the Real Estate Association of Maui. And again, another front line for Maui property. Please tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hi, Clint. Thank you for having me back on. As you mentioned, I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Realtors Association of Maui. And basically what I do is advocate for housing policy and advocate against bad policy that we think will negatively impact either our members who are realtors and affiliates who work around the realtor community, or just the community at large. We get concerned about policy that we think will detrimentally impact the community. So we're pretty active and pretty involved, and I love my job. So yeah, happy to be here.
Congratulations on the new addition to the family. How you feeling? Are you rested, exhausted?
I am extremely happy and extremely tired. It is challenging, but thankfully I have an amazing wife who is really just a champion, and our kid is just so adorable that we don't even mind the fact that he only lets us sleep a couple hours a night.
Delusion. It's just, being exhausted and seeing things in odd angles because you can't focus. It just makes everything adorable, especially little things. We I not nearly as important, but honestly, to my family and I, we have just got a new addition to our family. Ours is a little bit fuzzier than yours. I'll have to show you. It looks like Chewbacca or something like that. He's also not letting us sleep at night, but as long as he's sleeping right on your neck, it's fine. There's no whimpering or anything like that. So
very similar to my son.
So congratulations. That's a major milestone. But from my understanding, Maui tries to surprise you whenever you have any time off. You seem to have some sort of conspiracy against you, where they make these big controversial moves. And of course, just like last time, we're talking about the Minatoya. This one's a little bit more of a involved process, a little bit more of a serious issue. But what happened when as soon as they announced it? Did you get woken up at 2 a.m. with the first call, or getting a myriad of texts and emails?
When this first popped up on the agenda for the council's August 24th meeting, I think the first email that I got was actually from Jen Russo. She and that was before I went on my unofficial paternity leave, so I definitely didn't mind that. And that just goes to show, these groups like RAM, like the MVRA, if you're paying dues, it's worthwhile because we're on it. If I don't catch something immediately, I know Jen Russo is going to catch it, and vice versa. Though it's hard to get something before Jen catches it. I don't know how she does it. It's like a superpower. But yeah, Jen was the first to email me, and that's when we initially started the conversation of what are the arguments going to be? Is this a good idea? And that conversation started with Jen asking for some data that RAM collects through the MLS and analyzing that data. But it wasn't until really, I guess it was when Jen put out the call for action with the MVRA that our members really that's when they got the hint, like, oh, this is big news. We put it in Thursday things. It was just a little bit of a blurb in our weekly news update. But that call for action, I think, is what really triggered the concern from the realtors. And I won't step on Jen's comments here. Jen, why don't you talk about it a bit more?
Yeah, let's start about square one, what the
What is
Minatoya is, some of the history associated with it, and what the latest proposal is.
Well, I can speak to what the latest proposal is. The Minatoya history, I don't, have.
So I'll give yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah.
Okay. So in my time with the realtors, I started back in 2018, and this has been the #1 issue that I've gone to. So I have become sort of the local unofficial expert on the Minatoya issue. It's taken up so much of my time that even the National Association of Realtors asked me to present on it at a conference I was at recently to talk about some of the work that we've done with these Minatoya properties. So the short story of it is, back in the 70s and 80s, it was recognized that tourism would be a big part of Maui's economy. And so with that, condominiums started being developed with the real intent to serve as transient accommodations for visitors. The investments came from local folks, but also all over the United States, and a lot of offshore investment from Japanese interests. So that's the history of how these condos got developed. Now, in the 80s, there was a little bit of a growing resentment towards a lot of the visitor industry as it was popping up on Maui. And we can certainly recognize that that resentment kept on growing beyond that. At a certain point, the Maui County Council, back in, I believe it was 1990, tried to make legislation that would stop transient vacation rentals in the apartment zoning districts. Now, that legislation, the first attempt failed, the second attempt did not fail, but it was never really enforced. And it wasn't until around 2001, when Kimo Apana was mayor, that there was this notion to enforce against these transient vacation rental units in the apartment zoning districts. And at that time, Richard Minatoya, who's an attorney, he wrote an opinion for Mayor Apana saying that these units can be, they can continue to do TVRs because they're grandfathered in. They have a vested property right to continue to do transient vacation rentals. And that vested right, it stuck with it. The Minatoya opinion is how these properties got dubbed the Minatoya properties. And that was fine, but we recognized that just one legal opinion wasn't enough to really protect vested property rights. So my predecessors, Dave DeLeon and Lawrence Carnicelli, who were both government affairs directors for RAM prior to me, they worked hard on getting this codified. So they got it put into the Maui County Code around 2014, and then it was revised again a couple of times since then, saying that this isn't just a use, this is a permitted use for these properties, that they have the vested property right to conduct transient vacation rentals if they meet a few criteria. The criteria are outlined in the Maui County Code, and basically they have to have been built or existing before April 20th, 1989. They have to have a history of conducting transient vacation rentals prior to September 24th, 2020. Any one unit in these buildings can conduct transient vacation rentals. That means the whole building has that right. And they also have to meet the requirements of taxation, so TAT, GET, and whatnot. So that's where we're at. It is a permitted use. They have a vested property right to conduct transient vacation rentals in these units.
Yeah, and from my understanding, when they were originally working on these condominium associations, the intent and idea was always to be a vacation rental complex, because back then, hotel zoning or business zoning, there was kind of a blurred sense of lines, from my understanding. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, that is correct. And you can really see that in the fact that a lot of these units, they don't have a lot of parking. You know, it might be one parking stall or two parking stalls per unit, which if it was built for residential, that wouldn't be the case. Similarly, these units, they don't have the same storage that you would expect for a unit that's built for long-term residential. I mean, it's kind of like when you walk into a hotel room, you can tell that people aren't supposed to, have big families living in the hotel room for long periods of time just by their design. That's how these units are. It's the same thing.
And it's a massive number of units across the island. People kind of fail to realize it's about 10,000 from my understanding, right?
The current count is around 7,000 units.
Oh, okay, 7,000 units. And I mean, to me, that sort of makes sense why they would be targeting the Minatoya, because, there's a dramatic shortfall of properties here for residents on Maui. As decades and decades have gone by in restrictive building codes, lack of available materials and infrastructure planning, just not enough homes or duplexes and, higher density living has come up. So this has been a good opportunity to plug the hole. The problem is the intent and initial investment from, decades have gone by, and these are historically vacation rentable places. So we have, I think the government trying to do something to benefit the locals. But to me, the shortfall here is the fact that it's going to stifle the economy, because lots of people rely on these for income, both locally and abroad, from cleaners, association processes and whatnot. But the bigger issue that I see, and comes down to the more pieces and mechanics of the law, which I'll let you get into.
Yeah. The mechanics of the law, the way that it would work, and let me start by saying this bill is at the very beginning of the legislative process. So the next step is it's got to be reviewed by the 3 planning commissions. Then it's got to go back to the council's Planning and Sustainable Land Use Committee.
Actually,
Jen?
It's going to Planning and Sustainable Land Use Committee first. And it did not go straight to Planning Commission. And that's because several of the other council members have also mentioned coming up with a similar bill. Like Keani Rollins Fernandez has some ideas about how a phase out would work. Dave Johnson also with Affordable Housing Committee had some ideas. So it's going to committee to be hashed out so that they don't have 3 different bills floating around, basically.
Oh, got that mixed up. Sorry about that. Thanks, Jen.
Oh, yeah. So we can slow down the process. It's not going to an agenda on the Planning Commission first. It's going to get hacked out.
Okay. Get a little bit of time in order for us all to put our opinion in there, understand how it works. Now, this was a proposal. This might almost seem like a repeat radio show, because we were talking about the change in the Minatoya. The difference, from my understanding with this one compared to the last, is as opposed to just instituting the current use and making a change, they're just having a sunset. So when you sell the property and it transitions to the new owner, then that new owner is not able to do vacation rentals. Is that correct?
Yes. So it would be upon sale or transfer after a certain date. So the current date on the draft is December 31st, 2021.
Okay.
So the current owners can continue to do transient vacation rental use, but once it's sold or transferred, then the new owners lose it.
Okay. One of the big problems I see with this is it would actually end up stifling available inventory for all areas of the market, because what's going to end up happening is, these are, investments both for locals and, people abroad. So if all of a sudden there becomes something that's going to stifle the value of a property, and in my opinion, when I look at the numbers, like Halekama is right next door to Kihei Shores, and equivalent square footage is basically half the value. If you were to all of a sudden take away that ability to do vacation rentals, then there's really no incentive to sell the property, because you're going to be able to rent the unit. And if you were to sell it, your rate of return on that money, considering how much less it is compared to the income that you're making, is going to mean there's no way that you're going to want to sell it. If you end up selling it, you're going to be walking away from, you know, a good rate of return or a loan or other investment that you could be making with the equivalent cash. So what'll end up happening in the, you know, 10 to 20 year period following up to the rule change, if that ends up happening, is you're going to see an absolute evaporation of available vacation rentable properties, which is typically what visitors want to purchase. And instead, they're going to focus on properties that are non-vacation rentals, further restricting the available inventory on the market. Because why would somebody, you know, even care, you know, about purchasing a property that's non-vacation rentable in a complex when they could get something maybe cheaper or more likely just simply available, and then it's going to be less available for the people who actually need a place to live. So I think the county has a good intent in mind, but because it really is patching a hole, and well, it's really changing the direction of the ship, where instead of changing the direction of the ship, they should start patching the holes and, you know, fixing the problem that we have at hand. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but, you know, go on.
I mean, I agree with that problem, but I think there's just a whole slew of problems in addition to that. So, you know, my big issue here is the loss in revenue across several different revenue streams, and the biggest one being the real property taxes. You know, this past year, the Maui County Council had the affordable housing plan come up, and one of the big ideas was we're going to increase the amount of money that we put into the affordable housing fund through tax revenue, and we're going to bond against that to make major improvements for infrastructure and actually build affordable housing. But at the same time, they're going to cut off pretty much the largest revenue stream through the short-term rental property tax class. So if there are 7,000 properties that are currently paying the highest property tax, and now they want to phase that out, how are they going to increase the revenue that they put into the affordable housing fund? And then what are they going to bond against to build infrastructure? I kind of think that this is just some sort of weird sleight of hand. By tanking a certain sector of the housing market, they're going to be able to lower the statistics when it comes to average sales price and median sales price. And they could say, look, we've made housing more affordable, but they're not building any more housing. They're not getting any more units online that are suitable for our workforce or the folks that need affordable housing the most. And in fact, if the idea is, oh, let's take these 30 and 40-year-old buildings and let's not use them for transient vacation rentals anymore. Let's put poor people into these 30-plus-year-old condominiums that are in the sea level rise exposure area, and let's make them pay the special assessments for the infrastructure updates, or, you know, perhaps they can't. And then what? We have another Miami on our hands where a condo collapses, but it's our residents that are there. I'm really bothered by this. It seems really disingenuous because there's nothing that shows that this is going to increase the number of residential housing units. There's a lot of assumptions here. But then even aside from that, right when the county gets the ability to do a transient accommodation tax surcharge, they're going to reduce the number of transient accommodations that are going to be paying that tax. That, you know, once again, more revenue that the county's throwing out, that they're not going to be investing in people here. But then there's the state revenue as well. What about the general excise tax? And then when the property values of these properties reduce and they're sold, what happens with the conveyance tax? That's a huge loss in conveyance tax revenue. So also the county can say that, you know, we're getting rid of tourism, and they're not building any other industry at the same time, but we're going to get rid of the tourist accommodations, and then we're going to make investments with what money? It's a problem to me, Clint. And then that equity issue of just, you know, who are we going to stick in these aging buildings? Who's going to fit the bill for this?
Now, coming to the loan aspect of this, I would imagine, Byron, if somebody's going to be needing to do a refinance on a property that they're owning there, let's just say it's a resident that ends up living in a vacation rentable complex, which I've had many clients that do, and they've ended up having to try to sell and move, and it's had a myriad of issues in the juggle because they can't afford the taxes of where they're living. The question I have for you, Byron, is let's say somebody needs to do a refi so that they can remodel or come up with the cash to repair the aging plumbing of a building. I'm assuming that you're not going to be able to go off of, rate of return. You're going to have to go off of future resale value, right?
Future resale value for like the appraisal or for the value from the bank side, potentially?
Yeah, let's just say, for example, somebody's going to be refining a vacation
Okay.
rentable condo that they're vacation renting, but
Okay.
if they were to sell that property, or the bank's interest, if they had to sell it for a foreclosure, they're going to probably assess that at a much higher risk, considering like $1 million place is only going to resell for $550,000. So that's, most places don't have 50% loan to debt value, and
Yeah.
they're not going to be able to pull that cash from it to pay off that special assessment for the piping or whatnot. So
Yeah,
I would imagine
I think it's uncharted waters, so to speak, of
very
how the lenders will look at it, because usually what the first ones, if it does happen, would be the example that would base everything after. And you're right, it could create a domino effect. I mean, I don't know of any. I'm trying to think of any loans or any thoughts. I haven't seen any instances like that where it's flipped from one way to another that I know.
well, even nationwide, from my understanding. Wasn't there one place in Texas that tried this, Jason? What's the history of making such a substantial change in value?
Yes, there was a similar instance in Texas, in a municipality in Texas, and that case, from what I understand, has not gone to fruition yet. But in the early stages of litigation, a lot of the property owners sued the county because there was a diminishment in their value. And what the court determined was that they have an actionable claim. Now, what that means is it didn't get dismissed right offhand. So that municipality has to spend lots and lots of money to defend a lawsuit to figure out if what they did is constitutional or not, if it reaches the diminishment of value necessary to be considered regulatory taking, or essentially a condemnation. That's when it comes to litigation as a tool. It's not necessarily about winning the litigation, but about proving the point that it's going to cost a lot of money. So I don't know one way or the other if the diminishment in value of these properties from this legislation would equate to a regulatory taking. I just don't know. But I have a
lower
good
courts,
feeling.
yes, but not in upper courts. Well, upper courts just aren't finished yet.
I've got a good feeling that the property owners are going to want to find out. I've already been contacted by several property owners asking for referrals to attorneys who have experience in real estate litigation, because they're already getting groups together to see about either class action lawsuits or individual lawsuits against the county for the extreme loss in value that they're expecting here. And whether the county wins those lawsuits or not, I think it's going to cost a pretty penny. It's going to cost a lot of time and taxpayer resources to get to the bottom of it. And if at the same time the county isn't collecting property tax money at that high level for a lot of these properties, once again, it's just a drain on the system for what?
Well, it's a big distraction from actually creating affordable housing on the island. I mean, they should be focusing on improving infrastructure, getting, more water infrastructure in place so that actually properties can be built. And I'm not talking about the free flowing water or water right issues from rivers. I'm talking about tapping into our aquifer, piping, retention systems so that we can, give the appropriate water so that we can expand residential housing for people who live here. So what was your question, Byron?
No, I was gonna ask Jen, what is the Maui Vacation Rental Association? Are they hearing from their members, or is it just kind of in the beginning stages? You're not hearing much? What are you guys, or what's your company or organization doing?
Yeah, we've definitely heard from members, asking what can we do about this? Where do we go from here? And we're looking at the same sort of numbers. When you can't short-term rental it, and the intent here is to go to affordable housing, what are their actual mortgages like, plus the AOAO fees and insurances, and asking people who are owners or managers, what does that look like for that building? If we can get some of these numbers that show a regular family on Maui would not be able to afford that, and it's not going to be appropriate for affordable housing in terms of like a rental cost. And is the council prepared to make subsidies happen, or what are they thinking at that point? No.
Yeah, and I think most of these complexes would be wholly unprepared to deal with, a large influxes of residents that are going to be there. The aforementioned lack of parking, the lack of storage, smaller units. I truly believe instead of it causing additional inventory to come onto the market, it's actually going to stifle it, because people that are going to be normally ready to do a resale so that they could maybe 1031 into a better return on investment, they're just going to stop right there, continue to vacation rent their unit until they pass away. And then those units are no longer to come onto the market. And that's going to have everybody that wants to buy a second home, which, I mean, I got to tell you, the word on the street is we're living on Noah's Ark, and the mainland's dealing with incredible, changes in the weather. And we're living in one of the most stable weather patterns across the United States. I mean, a hurricane just went across the entire East Coast and left millions without power. They're coming to Maui, I think it's been over 180 years since we've been hit by a direct onslaught to a hurricane. And they see us as this ticket to the perfect weather pattern. And we're talking a very, very large population concentrating on a very tiny population. So people want property here, and let them fight against the properties that can give them a return, and have the county concentrate on creating infrastructure and affordable housing for people that are here. That's why my family and we've been on island for close to I think 30 years, over 30 years now. No, actually, close to 30 years now. And we helped with Nahalio Maui and with the Community Land Trust. And there's great work that people do out there to help create affordable properties in perpetuity. And this is a great idea, but they should have just followed the arc and see where it goes, and think about how people are going to react and the long-term effect of it. It's not adding 7,000 units. It's stripping rights from one person to try to benefit another group. And what people are going to do is they're going to just try to hold on to the remaining properties that they have, the income that they're able to get off of these. And it's going to just be a train wreck of the situation. And because the future value is going to be affected so significantly, it's going to reduce the value of the property, and that tax income is going to plummet dramatically, like you were saying. So I don't know how they think this is going to solve the issue.
I'm also concerned that this is just a gift to the hotel industry. I mean, that's the person who benefit, or the group that benefits the most from this legislation. It's not the folks who need affordable housing. It's not the workforce that needs housing. It's the hotel industry. It's eliminating any real competition outside of hotels and resorts. And the sweetheart treatment that the hotel and resort industry has been getting throughout the pandemic period, where my assessment didn't go down because of the pandemic, but all of the hotels got lower assessments and thus lower property taxes than anybody else because they weren't booking people. Jen, were your members, did they get lower assessments, any of the B&Bs or the STRHs?
Absolutely not. In fact, sorry. No, short-term rental assessments went up 25% in this last fiscal year, actually.
And are
Already
your
backwards.
I gotta ask, are those short-term rentals owned by multi-billion-dollar offshore companies that aren't based here?
Right, no, not at all. Several of them, in fact, are owned by residents.
But their assessments went up, and the hotel industry, their assessments went down during the pandemic. And then how about when I gotta ask also, sorry, I'm hijacking this, but I'm fired up now. When we were trying to bring back the visitor industry on Maui, what class of accommodations was allowed to open up while the short-term rentals weren't?
Hotel industry.
The hotel industry. You had Mayor Victorino, who I'm generally a fan of. He went on with the other four mayors and said that they're going to give a preference to the hotel industry to open up because you can contain tourists there more. So you saw that. Then they get the lower tax rates, and now the council is all working on a plan ostensibly for affordable housing, but really just to reduce any competition for the hotel industry. So I just don't get how this benefits the voters of Maui.
Yeah, I think there's an inherent loss for the small businesses on Maui with this suggestion as well, because these short-term rentals support a host of these small businesses, and that if it turns into a situation where it's long-term housing, there's not going to be the cleaners and landscapers and accountants and all of these small restaurants that exist around these buildings that are supported by this visitor industry.
Yeah, locally owned businesses and companies, compared to the big multinational corporations and foreign governments that own the hotels over here, that are getting generally the lion's shares of any breaks that are happening. I mean, I think one of the most telling things was with the fact that now they have a slightly reduced tax rate compared to other TVRs here on island. I was really surprised by that. When that went down, there was literally nobody in favor in terms of the interviews that were coming in and opinions of people, but one person, representing the hotels, made his thoughts known, and everybody voted in favor of increasing the taxes on basically people, as opposed to massive governments and multinational corporations. I was shocked that it was so one-sided in opinion compared to where they were voting. To me, there was a complete disconnect in our representation here in Hawaii. And that's, one of the things I've said, and I mean, I know that I might sound like a broken record here, but one of the biggest issues is the just massive costs for building everything here. And affordable housing is kind of a joke. Getting materials here, infrastructure, the timetable is 15 to 20 years usually, and you're fighting the process and approval to get something done. And with those ridiculously high costs, affordability just doesn't make sense. So I've always felt that with the massive popularity of Maui, we could use this visitor industry to help fund affordable housing, and not through direct taxes. Instead, give affordable allowances to these developers to say, hey, you know what? We're going to allow you, instead of jamming more visitors into the already crowded areas, we're going to be building these neighborhoods, putting the infrastructure in place, and making housing, and we're going to use this to vacation rent the area and lower the cost to the local person. That means that money that comes in, as opposed to being siphoned off into the mainland or to foreign governments, that's going to go directly back into the pockets of the people who live and work here on Maui. And it's going to, increase the profitability of affordable housing here on island. I mean, if you're a developer, do you want to build an affordable project that you're going to lose money on? no, you're going to want to go for something with a better margin, or at least some margin for that matter, and at least make the decades worth of time, to go through there. Instead, you could say, hey, how about this? You can benefit the local people and make more profits by creating these temporary vacation rentals. You're going to use that harvest money during that 3 to 5 year period. That equity that's going to be built up is going to go to the local people who live here that purchase, the massive nursing shortfall, doctors, the residents of Hawaii, police officers. I mean, these people are being completely priced out of the market. There's just simply nothing available. And if we did this, all of a sudden there would be incentive to make up the 10,000 property shortfall and get rid of these, not get rid of, but reduce the number of multi-generational households, give opportunities to the people who live here. So, I think they need to refocus their efforts away from, the people that are paying for their getting voted back into office and the money needed to advertise for their campaigns, and instead focus on the people who live here and work towards creating a system that works. I mean, put that infrastructure in place so we can live in just in a remote. The thing is, even the affordable stuff that's supposed to be affordable, there's no way. Even if you were to cut the value of a vacation rentable property in half and sell it, it's not going to be affordable. You need to make a home that's livable and a price that's swallowable for our income. Our incomes aren't that inflated here in Hawaii. How are people going to make it? It's just, it's not possible. And they need to think outside the box, but not at the detriment of people who are living here.
What is, like, for the Maui Vacation Rental Association, what has been the feedback since we kind of reopened? Has it been real busy? What are the homeowners saying? I'm just curious, we're coming out of COVID, some of the quarantine, we may be going back into it, some lockdowns, but what has happened with the vacation rental units? Have they been rented again? What have you been hearing, Jen?
Yeah, since we were reopened and they were allowed to operate under the latest COVID restrictions, yeah, they've been renting. But you have to realize vacation rentals, they don't rent at the same rate as a hotel room. There's often more space in between stays in them. You have a lot of owners who own them because they want to stay in them. So they come, 3 to 6 months out of the year. And especially when we opened up, we had a lot of those owners that came and wanted to stay. So, it's slightly different than hotel. Occupancy rates were good through the summertime, relatively. But since Ige made that announcement of, asking people not to come to Hawaii, that did have an effect. People have been talking about cancellations they've been seeing. And I believe the booking time that, we saw back in 2019, things were like getting booked out 6 months. We're not seeing those kind of numbers. People are a little bit more hesitant, especially given the current rise in COVID numbers. But I know that from what I hear that, booking a ticket out here is really affordable right now. So, people are looking at that. They want to book.
So Jason, how do we monitor? I mean, like you've got the Realtor Association, you send out emails to of what's going on. How does the layman or the person on the outside monitor these things that are happening internally with the county?
I would say, the number one thing that I wish all of us were involved with, Jen and I, thankfully it's our job and we like this stuff. So it's a luxury that we get to monitor this stuff on our own. But for the layperson, I know it's difficult and it seems kind of crazy, but look at the agendas. Just keep an eye on the calendar for the Maui County Council. And, they have their agendas that are posted a week in advance. And that's where you're going to see on these agendas what the issues are. When it comes to housing stuff, land use stuff, it's going to be the Planning and Sustainable Land Use Committee that you really want to pay attention to. But really, there's something for everybody. If you are a farmer, keep an eye on the agricultural committee, see what they're doing. For infrastructure, for climate action, they've got many committees that are most of them are doing great work. Just because I'm a critic on this issue doesn't mean that I'm a critic on everything that the county council is doing. And so not just to see if there are things that you can criticize, but also to see if there are things that you can support, because that's how we guide policy. So honestly, just Google Maui County Council calendar, and it'll take you to the link, and just make sure you go there. And you could even set email alerts where it'll tell you either by committee or by the whole council, where you could set an email alert for all of them to get an email whenever a new agenda comes out, and it'll give you a link to that agenda. That's how I find out about this stuff. I mean, I look at the calendar itself, but mostly it's email notifications that I get about the agendas. And this is the same for the boards and commissions. Maui County's Charter Commission is currently having their meetings. They do this every 10 years. That's how the county updates its, essentially its county constitution. That's hugely important. That only happens every 10 years. And most of our populace has no idea what the Charter Commission is or what the charter is. We are at a time where populism is really the growing trend in local politics. And we're seeing that Facebook is just as powerful, if not more powerful, than any amount of super PAC dollars that are getting put into elections. And, don't listen to only the people on Facebook that you think look nice or you think agree with you, because everybody's got their own agenda and their own perspective. Go look at the county council's calendar, and also set Google News alerts. That's how I get a lot of information. I get a news alert for the county council every day, for Maui mayor every day, and I have a couple of my own name. I get a Google News alert if somebody quotes me.
That's how I knew you had a baby. That's it. Google told me.
Google News alert.
Yeah, it was huge.
So we should all be doing that. And, honestly, Jen's, the MVRA's emails that they put out are hugely informative. The Realtors Association of Maui, we try and do some publicly facing stuff, but our membership is really our core constituency. We are most focused on the issues that impact our 1,800 plus members. And those are the people that we are most interested in reaching out to. But I think the MVRA has just done a really great job as far as a lot of that publicly facing advocacy and just information that you can get. So I'm just going to give them a plug.
And Jen, how do we do that? How do we follow that as a layman?
Right. Go to our website. We're at mvra.net. And there's a pop-up that comes up. You can sign up for a newsletter. And I keep most of the topics that we send out in our newsletter. We have a blog on that site too, a news feed, and I post stories there regularly.
Wow. So, going back, I like that idea, Jason, going not just simply to hate on something or one of the proposals, but actually show up and support, because everybody that I see there is not there so much to advocate on the benefits of something that's going to happen. They're there to say, hey, I don't want this school to be built because I live nearby and I don't want to hear kids screaming, as opposed to being like, oh my goodness, I am so desperate for a place to put my kid in school that's within a relative drive. Everybody wants to hate on something as opposed to really show the support that is necessary for all these proposals that are going in. Now, obviously, we're here to talk about the negative impacts of the proposal at hand to change or put a sunset on the Minatoya when the property transfers ownership. But my question to you is, what counselors, what people should we be sending emails to? What Facebook should we be commenting on to say, hey, look, when it comes time to consider the change to the Minatoya, please leave it the way it is. What would you recommend?
I recommend reaching out to all the county council members. The county council is broken down into residency districts that they represent, But in truth, we vote for every single one of them. We have council members who didn't win the popular vote in their residency district, but because they won more votes in West Maui than they did in their residency district, then they get to be council member. And that's perfectly fine. They're making decisions that impact all of Maui. So I think we should all be allowed to vote for all of them. And we do. We generally do, and we should. And because of that, if we've got feedback, we should contact all of them and let all of them know, this is in line with my positions, and I will vote in favor of the people that support this, or this is against my positions. In this instance, I think it's imperative that you contact all of them. Now, obviously, some of them are going to be more responsive than others. The county council members are very upfront in their meetings about the policies that they are going for here. And it's pretty clear that this county council, the majority of the members have had a bee in their bonnet about these TVRs in the apartment zoning districts for quite some time. Council member Tamara Paulton, she wrote this piece of legislation, and it's not the first time that she took a swing at the TVRs in the apartment zoning district. So it's pretty unlikely that the author of the bill is going to change their mind about the bill that they authored. However, they take that feedback, and even if she doesn't, scrap this bill, if enough of us point out the issues with it, maybe it'll be modified in a way that makes it more reasonable and more palatable. I hope. But yeah, just contact everybody. Don't be afraid. You vote for it.
I like the public aspect of Facebook. It really makes a lot of sense to not just send them a private message specifically for testimony, but also to, direct your opinions and information to them in a public atmosphere, so that it's not something that they can just ignore, but something that's right there out and all for everybody to see, so that they can see that, hey, this is going to follow me everywhere. These decisions that affect everyone is not just for the benefits of the large corporation. You got to think about the people that you represent as well. So I think that's brilliant and important. And when I say that, go into their Facebook, don't just go there and be like, you're a bad person. How dare you do this to me? Do you understand how you're affecting this? Actually point out the tax implications, the restrictions on available inventory, how this is going to create a problem, for projects down in the future, and repiping, future valuations, tax issues, future incomes. There's so many reasons that this doesn't work. I get the heart of the bill, the idea to create inventory for the people who live here, but it's not at a price that's affordable. It's not a product that really is designed for residents. And it's not the right way to go about it by, destroying the rights of one property owner to try to benefit another. It's a backwards approach, and really they need to approach creating more supply and benefiting the locals and giving them the option to purchase truly affordable properties.
Yeah, Clint, I think you hit something very important. I don't think any of the council members are bad people. I think they all got into it for the right reasons. I have had conversations with every single one of them, and I've enjoyed those conversations. I think generally their policies are good. And, Tamara Paulton got money from the National Association of Realtors. We gave we supported her in her last campaign. In retrospect, now with this bill, maybe that wasn't the best idea, but I still don't regret it, because I think she's a very intelligent person that generally comes up with great policy ideas. You can disagree with policy and still agree with the people and still want to work with them. And that's the only way we're going to get out of this housing crisis. If instead of this attack mentality that just because somebody disagrees with you or they're doing something you don't like, that we have to hate them, that is absurd. And that is how we are all going to fail as a community. That's why it's important to, even when you message these council members on this one issue, come at it from a perspective of, I see that you're trying to do the right thing here. I see that you're trying to do good. I disagree with what the assumptions are. And that's key here. They're not bad people. The intent is good. It's just, it's bad assumptions that are leading us into bad policy. And that's what I want to be clear on. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I think this is something hopefully that we'll be able to get across to them and see that there are other options out there. To me, I was really impressed. We were talking to one of the local representatives, and the idea of creating more infrastructure instead of relying on developers, massive financial backing. It doesn't give the opportunity for small local construction companies to create, individualized small neighborhoods, unique townships. It really just leaves it up to the people with the deep pockets. Creating infrastructure should be something that is, pulled from taxation and bonds that goes to build that infrastructure, and then that development that ends up happening helps pay for the infrastructure that gets put in place. It's a way, it almost happens everywhere across the United States, and is a wonderful copyable model. And it should be something that's done here and now and in great quantity, because if we don't, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. The counselors have to get behind it. We need to build homes that are designed and targeted specifically and allowed for people who live and work on island. If we don't, we're all going to suffer. And it's a terrifying future that's in front of us, when the only people who can afford to buy property here are people with large, deep pockets, from far, far away, and that see Maui as an investment. One of the things that I'm really scared of that hasn't happened yet here in Hawaii specifically, but it's starting to happen in large population districts, is that you see, Zillow coming along with massive hedge funds, and they're going and purchasing property in mass, and they know that they're able to A, rent those properties out, and B, leverage that on an asset that's going to increase in value, because they know it's something that we want. We need legislation in place that's going to prevent billions of dollars from, coming in to purchase out the homes designed for people who live and work on an island here. So they have major undertakings that are on the horizon that they need to be focusing on, as opposed to trying to benefit, the hotels that aren't really helping people that live here. So I really appreciate everybody's help today and coming to discuss this issue. It's something that is kind of terrifying, really. And I think that, many times, like, you were saying, we are so focused on, sticking to our little tribes and groups of people and opinions, that we fail to understand the intent behind it. We all can agree on the intent. We want affordable housing here in Hawaii. The end result in this bill, though, is just going to further constrain available inventory, because nobody's going to sell something that they're going to sell for half the value or significantly less than a rate of return. I mean, if you put the sale of a property and you're going to get less than a fraction of a percent, nobody's going to sell it. They're going to be able to hold that asset as long as humanly possible in order to, basically live off of and benefit them. So think about that. Think about how bad it's going to get. We already don't have enough inventory. And if all of a sudden all these people say, there's no way I can sell this, I can't pull my value, I just got to continue to rent it out, that's what's going to happen. So anything else, other points that you guys would like to add or questions for this this morning?
I think I've covered pretty much, unless anybody's got, I think we've covered pretty much everything. I think the positive thing is, and I learned a lot, was, going in with the remembering that, they're not the enemy, or people aren't the enemy. You need to have open dialogue and open discussions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about the private equity groups coming in. Blackstone, this corporate feudalism, that's the thing that we really need to be afraid of. The corporations that own the businesses that we work for are the same corporations that own the houses that we have to rent because we can't afford to buy anymore. That's the future that I'm terrified of. And that's why I'm so upset about these gifts to the hotel industry, because they're all under the same umbrella. And every time they do something to hinder the individual property owner, it's just getting us one step closer to Bernie Sanders' nightmare.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, efforts, and communicating clearly the problem at hand here. I hope everybody goes out and follows up with contacting their representatives to express how they feel and how we need to work towards a better future for Maui. And this isn't that path. Again, we have Byron Yap with Axia Home Loans. Thank you so much for coming and co-hosting this radio show with me. And thank you, Jason Economou of the Government Affairs, who's the Government Affairs Director for Real Estate Association of Maui. Always a pleasure. And Jen Russo of the Maui Vacation Rental Association. Thank you for being a director there and all the work that you do. This is Clint Hansen with Maui Real Estate Radio. If you want to listen to this show, you can always tune in Monday at 11:10 a.m. 98.7 FM or 96.7 FM, and our friends on the west side at 95.5 FM. That's every 7 a.m. on Monday, or go to MauiRealEstateRadio.com. If you want to search for property here on island, I always recommend our website, MauiRealEstate.net. We have the best and most concise available information out there. If you want to know tax info, maps, even if you want to have up-to-date statistics, we all have that at your fingertips. So please go to MauiRealEstate.net. And I'm Clint Hansen with Maui Luxury Real Estate. I've been selling real estate for 20 years with my family, who's had their license for well over 40 for my mom and 38 years for my dad. So close to 100 years of experience. Hope to see you guys next week, and thank you